Last summer, I had a work conference in a city a few hours from home. It ran late into the evening, so I decided to book a room at a nearby hotel instead of driving back that night. I found a budget hotel online with decent reviews and made a reservation. When I arrived, the place seemed off. It wasn't run down, exactly, but there was something about how quiet it was that unsettled me. The lobby was empty except for a woman at the front desk. She looked surprised to see me, like she wasn't expecting anyone. "You're our only guest tonight," she said with a strained smile. That should have been my first red flag, but I was too tired to care. My room was on the second floor at the end of a long hallway. The first thing I noticed was how dated the room felt. Everything was clean, but it had an eerie stillness, like it hadn't been used in a long time. I decided to take a shower before bed, but as I stepped into the bathroom, I heard a faint knock at the door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. Thinking it was just my imagination, I went back to getting ready for bed. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. This time, when I checked the peephole, I caught a glimpse of someone walking away down the hall. I called the front desk, but no one answered. Feeling uneasy, I double-checked the lock on the door and decided to try and sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound coming from the closet. It was a faint, rhythmic tapping, like something was brushing against the door from the inside. My heart sank. The closet door was slightly ajar, and I could see darkness inside. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked toward the closet. Just as I reached out to pull the door open, the tapping stopped. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but nothing happened. Finally, I shut the closet door and pushed the chair in front of it, trying to convince myself it was nothing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed in bed with the lights on, staring at the closet, listening for any sound. By the time the sun came up, I was ready to leave. I packed my bag and headed down to the lobby, eager to check out and put the whole experience behind me. But when I got there, the woman at the front desk wasn't there. The lobby was completely empty. I waited for a few minutes, then rang the service bell, but no one came. Finally, I decided to leave my key on the counter and head out. As I turned to leave, I noticed something strange on the wall behind the desk. Several Polaroid photos pinned to a bulletin board. They were all of guests standing in the same lobby. Some of the photos looked old, others more recent. And then I saw it. A photo of me, taken the night before. I didn't remember anyone taking my picture. In the photo, I was standing at the counter checking in, but there was someone behind me in the background. A man, partially obscured, standing at the edge of the frame. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my bag and rushed out to my car, not caring if anyone saw me leave. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and thought I saw movement in the window of my room. When I got home, I tried calling the hotel to report what had happened, but the number I had went straight to voicemail. A few days later, I looked it up again, only to find out the hotel had been shut down for over a year after a string of violent incidents involving guests. I still don't understand how I stayed there, or who else was in that building, but I know I'll never set foot in an empty hotel again, no matter how tired I am. Some places aren't meant to be open. About a year ago, I took a last-minute business trip to a city I'd never been to before. By the time my flight landed, it was late and I was exhausted. The hotel my company booked for me was a tall, older building downtown. It looked fine from the outside, but something about it gave me a weird feeling the moment I walked in. The check-in process was smooth, but the clerk barely spoke to me. She handed me my key and told me my room was on the 9th floor. I got in the elevator and hit the button, but halfway up the elevator jolted and the lights flickered. When the doors opened, I stepped out, only to realize I wasn't on the 9th floor. There were no signs or numbers on the walls, and the hallway looked... I tried to get back into the elevator, but the doors closed before I could reach them. My key card wasn't working to call it back, so I decided to find a staircase. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed that all the doors were slightly ajar. Not wide open, but just enough to make me feel like I was being watched. When I peeked into one of the rooms, it was completely empty. No furniture, no decorations, just an empty space with old carpet and peeling walls. I quickly backed out and kept moving. Eventually, I found a stairwell and hurried down a flight. This time, the floor looked normal, and there were signs directing me back to the elevators. I got to my room on the 9th floor, locked the door behind me, and tried to convince myself that I'd just been tired and mistaken. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard a soft knock at my door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. Then, the phone in my room started ringing. I picked it up, but there was no one on the line, just faint static. The next morning, I told the front desk clerk about the strange floor and the phone call. She gave me a blank look and said, "There's no floor like that in this building. Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" I didn't argue, but I knew what I'd seen. I went about my day, but something about the encounter nagged at me. That night, I decided to take a closer look. Around midnight, I left my room and went back to the elevator. I pressed the button for the 9th floor, but just before the doors closed, I quickly hit the stop button and pressed the button for the 8th floor instead. The elevator jolted again, just like the night before, and the lights flickered. When the doors opened, I was back on that strange floor. This time the hallway felt colder, and the air was heavy. I walked slowly, noticing that some of the doors were now fully open. Inside one of the rooms, I thought I saw movement, a shadow darting across the wall. I turned to leave, but the elevator doors wouldn't open. The call button didn't respond. I ran back to the stairwell, but when I opened the door, it led to another hallway instead of stairs. Panic set in. I started running down the hall, not caring where I was going, just desperate to get out. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, getting closer. I turned around, but no one was there. Finally, I reached another stairwell. This one looked normal, and I bolted down the steps until I reached the lobby. The clerk was gone, and the lights in the lobby were dimmed. I ran out to the street and didn't stop until I was far from the building. The next morning, I checked out without saying a word. A few weeks later, I looked up the hotel online. Apparently, the building had undergone renovations a few years earlier, and during construction, a worker had fallen to his death from an unfinished floor. I don't know if what I experienced was real or if my mind was playing tricks on me, but I haven't stayed in a high-rise hotel since. Something about that building felt wrong, like it wasn't entirely in this world. A few months ago, I was traveling for work and ended up booking a room at a small hotel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't my first choice, but everything else was full, and I didn't feel like driving any farther. The place looked average, nothing fancy, but clean enough for one night. When I checked in, the woman at the front desk seemed distracted. She kept glancing at the clock, her hands fidgeting with the pen. She handed me the key and told me I was in room 305, and then she added, almost as an afterthought, "If you hear anything strange tonight, just ignore it. The building's old." I laughed nervously, assuming she was trying to make a joke. She didn't laugh back. The elevator wasn't working, so I had to take the stairs up to the third floor. The hallway was eerily quiet, with only a dim light flickering at the far end. My room was at the very corner. The first thing I noticed when I got inside was how cold it was, even though the air conditioning wasn't on. The second thing I noticed was that the window wouldn't lock. It kept sliding open just slightly, no matter how many times I tried to secure it. I finally gave up and stuffed a chair in front of it, telling myself I was being paranoid. Around midnight, I was woken up by the sound of knocking. It wasn't on my door. It sounded like it was coming from the room next door. At first, I thought it was just another guest, but then I realized I hadn't seen anyone else on this floor. The knocking continued, slow and rhythmic, for what felt like hours. I tried calling the front desk, but the phone in my room was dead. I didn't dare open the door, so I just lay there, wide awake, until the sun came up. The next morning, I went downstairs to tell the woman at the front desk about the knocking. She seemed confused. "There's no one in the room next to you," she said. "Room 307 has been closed for months." That didn't make sense. I had clearly heard knocking from that side of the wall. I asked if I could check the room, but she refused, saying it wasn't safe to enter. I spent the day trying to focus on my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. By the time I got back to the hotel, it was dark, and the lobby was empty. I decided to investigate for myself. I walked down the hallway and stood outside room 307. The door was slightly ajar. Against my better judgment, I pushed it open. The room was empty, just like the woman had said. The furniture was covered with white sheets, and there was a layer of dust on the floor. But what caught my attention was the window. It was wide open, and the chair I'd used to block mine was now sitting in the middle of this room. Before I could process what I was seeing, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but the hallway was empty. Then, from the corner of the room, I heard a faint whisper. "Why are you here?" I bolted out of the room and ran straight to the front desk. The woman was there this time, and I demanded to know what was going on. She hesitated, then finally admitted. Something happened in that room years ago. A guest, well, he didn't check out. Since then, people have reported strange things, but we've kept it quiet to avoid bad press. I didn't wait for more details. I grabbed my bag and left the hotel that night, driving until I found another place to stay. A week later, I checked my credit card statement and saw a strange charge from the hotel. It wasn't for room 305. It was listed as room 307. I called to ask about it, but the number was disconnected. When I looked up the hotel online, I found out it had been permanently closed just a few days after I left. No explanation, no warning, just shut down. Still don't know what happened in that room, or why. It felt like someone, or something, had followed me. All I know is, I'll never stay in a small, quiet hotel again. Some places are better left alone.